All right, so we were just having this chat earlier, Juan, about Brokernomics, where you wanted to cover a few angles, and those centered around acquisition, retention, and support. So could I ask you to start going a bit deeper into it for both my understanding as well as anybody else watching this? So let's go with direct acquisition. What is direct acquisition? What should I infer when you talk about this?
Okay, so how should I even start it? So I think we've promised that we're going to look at this levers of brokerage value by digging into some data that's public. Now, obviously, I don't want to get myself into a hole by looking at competitors and looking at commenting on the current performance. So what I have done is I've digged out some old investor relations presentations by the broker that I consider possibly the reference in terms of doing things properly in the retail trading space, which is IG Group.
And most impressive reporting standards too.
Yeah, no, very, very transparent and high value reporting standards. As a matter of fact, we are copying them. So
shamelessly swiping.
So we're basically looking at our internal, putting all together our internal metrics, which we've got plenty of, and creating a core standard of metrics to benchmark our performance against other players in the industry. I don't really consider IG a competitor in the sense that we go for a niche of clients which is far more focused and concentrated than theirs. But one way one way or the other, the metrics don't change.
Exactly.
And
so before we tread further, this screen is going to come up in this video, and will immediately overwhelm if we don't understand why we're talking about these particulars. So could you just shed light on what it means, what direct acquisition means to a broker, and we take it from there using the IG report as a reference?
Yeah, so basically in terms of acquisition, there's broadly speaking three ways in which a new customer could hit a broker. It could be direct by virtue of the actions that a broker takes to acquire customers in its own name. I mean, that's basically say advertising, online or offline, or paying Barcelona to wear your logo in their shirt. That would be one way to do this.
Okay.
The other and possibly most prevalent one is indirect by virtue of introducing partners. These could be trading academies. It could be people who are in the business of selling the idea of trading to others, who run seminars.
Would this include affiliates?
This is basically the affiliate network.
The whole affiliate side of things.
Yeah, the whole affiliate. So these are people who get paid, get a portion of the volumes done by people who are referred to the business. And last but not least, which is I think the unicorn, is organic referral with happy long-term customers who really love
come via recommendation,
and so on. So I think Darwinex is a rare avis in that all we do is organic, and I'll explain why we do that. And this is a long-standing theme. A lot of people tell us, "Oh, Darwinex should get the name out there more."
Spend a bunch of money.
Right. You should spend the money in advertising and so on. So one of the purposes of this Brokernomics thing is explain why we don't do that. And actually, we don't do that because we can't, unless we give up on our agency business model, which is something that's not on the cards. So we'll come back to that. But basically, you cannot have it both ways. If you want to be agency and not take positions against customers, then you also have to accept that we will not be able to do advertising. That's the long and the short of it. But for now, we're going to focus on the direct and indirect channels. And look at the lifetime value, what brokers are willing to spend in order to acquire a new customer.
Okay.
So let's switch over to the IG presentation and focus on the left-hand side of this chart. Okay. So what we're looking at is these columns are the number of new customers, like a new customer is referred to as a client first trade. So a customer who's onboarded, deposited money, and placed his first trade in the first half of financial year 16, for instance. Okay, that would be one. So as we can see, IG onboards to the tune of 20,000 to 30,000 customers per half year. So that's 60,000 customers a year. And that's basically, as we're covering the acquisition side of things, we look at, okay, so roughly speaking, per year, they'll be onboarding something like, give or take, 40 to 50,000 new guys. Okay, in financial year 16, then 17 seemed to have been a pretty good year, would be more like almost 60,000. Okay, so it's 60,000, 30,000 per year half. And then what we also look at, and this is when I first came into the industry, was the mind-boggling number. So the cost for first trade was £1,050.
Oh,
okay.
Holy moly.
And this is the across the board. IG have successfully promoted trading in shares, which are unlevered. If you look at the OTC leverage, which is Forex and indices, which is what we do, then the cost of acquiring a customer is £1,400.
So for those of the people listening and sort of thinking about this more, cost per first trade and cost per first trade in either of those two categories refers to the amount of money the broker needs to spend in a bunch of different ways in order to acquire this customer and get them onboarded.
Exactly. So if we're talking about 50,000 new customers per year at a cost of £1,400, 50,000 times 1,400. So IG spent 70 million in the financial year of 17 to onboard 50,000 new customers.
That is expensive. Wow.
Okay, so anybody asking why does Darwinex not invest in advertising? Well, because we'd rather spend this in technology that makes people happy, that makes people trade better, and that makes people recommend this, because then technology can seem cheaper, like very expensive, but it's very, very cheap compared to the cost of doing this the traditional way.
Wow.
Okay, and then we look now at the right-hand side of this, which is the cumulative average client value. So what happens here? So actually the chart is built in the wrong way, because it should start. So at time 0, we are at minus 1,400. So we should be here. Right? That's the guy comes in unaware that £1,400 have been spent in getting him to place his first trade. And now he starts generating revenue at a certain profile.
For IG.
For IG in this case. So as you can see, the payback period is around month 3 or 4.
When they break even on this customer, yes?
At this point, they break even on this customer.
Okay.
And then we see the different cohorts. So the cohorts, like red would be the guys who were on board in the financial year of 18, for which we've only got 6 months of data.
Yeah.
Then the guys who were in financial year 17, we've already got 12 months of data and so on. So you can see how the cohorts behave over time in creating extra revenue on top of the cost of acquisition.
Right.
So for a broker to work, it's all about the cost per first trade versus the cumulative average client value. As long as you fish people who make you more than the cost of the first trade, then you're fine at the very least to keep going.
Right.
If at some point this goes up and this goes down,
then you've got problems.
then you've got a serious issue.
Yeah.
Okay. And in some ways, I liken this business model, which again, this is not you have to figure out, IG is somebody we respect, that's highly regulated, who have been around since 1977 and are in this for the long run, because that's what their shareholders expect them to do. So this is, we're looking at the creme de la creme in the sector.
Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
So, this is, hats off, well done, because these guys know what they're doing. I don't want anybody to imply that I'm criticizing IG or anything, because that's far from what I would do.
No, there's no reason to. Yeah.
There's no reason to. So this is just how the sector works. We've picked up somebody who's big so that the numbers are representative. And unfortunately, I could not give you these numbers for us because we spent exactly zippo in advertising. So we can't disclose our own numbers because we don't do this thing. Okay.
Actually, this is a good point. A good point in the conversation to tell people how we go about attracting clientele. Anyway, And it's
I'd say we can talk about that, but I think that the only way we go about attracting clients is
in a summary fashion. Yeah.
In a summary fashion is we don't go about attracting clients. We basically produce videos that we think are interesting and feed a community who hopefully finds these interesting and shares them with others who are keen to learn about the sector they operate in.
Very much an inbound practice.
Yeah, well, it's 100% an inbound practice, yes. Actually, we do something which is, and people will notice, I get this very often, but Juan's a liar because, I see Darwinex ads all over the place. Well, actually, that's called, there's a practice called retargeting, which is based on these cookies. So once you visit the Darwinex site for the first time, until you sign up, we're going to retarget you. So everywhere you go, if you go for reading the newspaper, whatever, we then purchase ads that are specifically served to you because you've already visited the Darwinex site to make you think like Darwinex is a really, really, really big thing who does a lot of advertising. But as a matter of fact, we don't. We need someone to have referred you to our site before you get to notice or get to be reminded that we exist and that we're there for you.
Absolutely. And it's not blanket advertising. People have 100% opt-in and opt-out privileges in that whole practice. So people don't just get slammed with stuff in their face without having agreed to it.
No, we just want you to not procrastinate and get your trading to the next level by signing up now. That's basically the idea. And if you're doing this, then we've got a series on Brokernomics. We've now covered how direct acquisition works. In upcoming episodes, we'll be covering as much as we know indirect acquisition. So what IBs get paid for referring you to sites, which, as you can imagine, has a relationship to this. And and thereafter we'll talk about retention patterns. How long do people stay and generate patterns? So basically, how does this, as you can see, this curve keeps going up, but it's sort of tailing off as we approach the first 12 months. And that's when the issues hit because customers don't live for much longer than 12 months, unfortunately, in the sector.
Brilliant.
So that's that. Any questions, comments? We look forward to them. We'll try and adjust next episodes of this Brokernomics series to reflect on them. And hopefully, as you give those to us, we'll improve the relevant sections in our community to get something that's of value to anybody who's joining the brokerage in the future.
And as a client, as a user, or as a trader in general, if you have any further questions about broker operations that you haven't the faintest clue about, feel free to ask them in the comments or on our community forum, and we'll see if we can include them in future or just do dedicated tutorials around them.
Thanks very much, Ali.
Take care.
Cheers.